There is a machine 4 billion miles from here that has been running for 4 billion years with no engine, no moving parts, and nobody maintaining it. It is a refrigerator. It hangs in the sky over Pluto, it is made of soot, and you could lose the entire apparatus in your fingerprint. It runs on sunlight. Not in spite of the sunlight. On it. The light that is supposed to warm that world is the exact thing this machine uses to strip the heat out of it and throw the heat into space. In June of 2025, a telescope finally measured how well it works. It works 30 degrees better than anyone's model said it could. That should have been the story of the month. It was a story for about a day. If you want space stories with the research left in and the adjectives taken out, subscribe. This one starts with a speck of soot 4 billion miles away and ends up over your head. In the sky life started under. Start with how little we had. In February of 1930, a 24-year-old named Clyde Tombaugh sat in a room outside Flagstaff, Arizona, flipping between two photographic plates of the same patch of sky, hunting for one dot that had shifted while everything around it stayed nailed in place. Months of nights produced nothing. Then one dot shifted. That was Pluto. For the next 85 years, a moving dot is essentially all it was. No telescope on Earth could resolve it into a disk. We knew where it was, because position is the easy part. Its size, its surface, whether it held onto any air at all, those were argued rather than measured. And some early estimates had it enormous, because astronomers assumed something massive out there had to be tugging on Neptune's orbit. The tug turned out to be an error in the measurements. There was nothing there to do the tugging. So the ninth planet on your classroom wall was assembled almost entirely out of inference. And in 2006, the International Astronomical Union took a vote, and Pluto walked out of that room a dwarf planet. The only world we have ever found, named, taught to children, and then demoted by ballot. 9 years later, we finally went to look. New Horizons came in at more than 30,000 miles an hour with exactly one chance, no orbit, no second pass, a few minutes of data from up close, and then gone into the dark for good, and what it sent back broke the file. Mountains of water ice, 11,000 feet tall, frozen hard enough at those temperatures to behave like bedrock. Plains of nitrogen ice churning in slow convection cells, which means heat, which means something underneath was never dead, and above all of it, the thing nobody had ordered. A blue haze, stacked in thin layers, reaching more than 185 miles above the surface, higher and more structured than the models permitted. So what is it? The haze is not water, and it is not dust blown off the ground. It starts with methane. The ultraviolet light reaching Pluto is a feeble thing, 1,000 times weaker than what lands on your street. And it is still enough to snap a methane molecule in half. The fragments do not disperse, they find each other. They build, heavier and heavier, a chemical assembly line running in a sky at 400 degrees below zero, and what comes off the end of it is a class of reddish-brown organic solids called tholins. They form high up, they drift down. They have been snowing onto that surface for something in the neighborhood of 4 billion years. Every grain up there is the output of a factory with no operator, and the factory has never shut down. And every one of those grains was supposed to be a blanket. That is the part worth slowing down for, because it is the reason nobody looked. We had a rule for what organic haze does, and we got the rule from Titan. Saturn's largest moon wears the same kind of smog, built the same way, sunlight tearing methane and nitrogen apart, and letting the wreckage reassemble into heavier junk that drifts and hangs. On Titan, that smog absorbs sunlight and warms the air underneath it. It holds heat in. That is what a haze does. That is what a haze had done in every atmosphere we had ever been able to check. So Pluto had a blanket too, a thinner and much colder one, and everybody moved on. For 2 years, nobody in the field seriously suggested otherwise. The blanket was backwards. Shi Jiang, a planetary scientist at the University of California, Santa Cruz, said so in 2017, and the argument he made was that Pluto's haze particles soak up sunlight during the day and then radiate that energy straight back out into space as infrared, and that they do it so efficiently the air loses heat faster than it gains it. Not a blanket, a radiator, bolted onto a world with almost no heat to spare in the first place. Colleagues found it unlikely, and it did not matter in the slightest what anyone found, because nothing in orbit and nothing on the ground could go and settle it. The signal Zhang needed sat in the mid-infrared, and every telescope we had smeared Pluto together with its moon into one unresolved smudge. Whatever heat you measured, you could not say how much of it was Pluto and how much was Charon bleeding in from a few pixels away. So the idea sat there for 8 years. Not disproven, not confirmed. Parked in the worst place an idea can be parked. Inside a question nobody on this planet had the hardware to ask. What moved it in the end was not a better camera. It was a bigger mirror and a different way of looking. Webb does not fly past anything. It takes light apart. Point it at a pinprick of reflected sunlight and it hands back the chemical fingerprint of whatever is doing the reflecting, which molecules are there, how warm each layer of them is, how the whole arrangement shifts over time, without anybody leaving Earth. Its mirror is 21 feet across, and that is the entire trick. That much collecting area was finally enough to pull Pluto's glow apart from Charon's and hold the two of them separately, which is a sentence that sounds like a technicality, and is actually the whole reason you are hearing any of this. Understand the problem that Mirror was solving. From here, Pluto and Charon are not two objects. They are one point. 12,000 miles of gap, 4 billion miles of distance, and the angle that works out to is roughly the angle between the two headlights of a car parked 300 miles from you. Older telescopes could not split it. So every heat measurement anyone had ever taken of Pluto had Charon stirred into it, and no amount of cleverness could unstir them, and that is the entire reason a good idea sat on a shelf for 8 years while the man who had it got older. Webb splits it. Barely. At those wavelengths it is working at the edge of what it can do. In 2022, once the instruments were calibrated, Webb started watching. It measured the system's mid-infrared brightness at 15, 18, 21, and 25 microns, over and over, as Pluto turned. Pluto is roughly 40 times farther from the Sun than you are. The sunlight arriving there is about 1,000 times fainter than the light landing on your street right now. Noon on Pluto is dimmer than dusk here, and inside the leftovers of that light, at that range, Webb was listening for a temperature difference, in a place where the best anyone had ever managed before was a smear. The answer came back on June 2nd, 2025, in Nature Astronomy. A team led by Tanguy Bertrand at the Paris Observatory found extra mid-infrared emission that Pluto's surface could not account for and that the gas in its air could not account for either. It traced back to the haze. The particles are the ones running the heat balance of the entire atmosphere, exactly the way the backwards idea said they would, and Pluto's upper atmosphere came in around 333 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, about 30 degrees colder than the models predicted. Bertrand's own description of what they had found was that it is unique in the solar system. His exact words were, "a new kind of climate, let's say." That is a strange thing to hear from the man who led the paper in Nature Astronomy, because it is not a result. It is an admission that the shelf the result belongs on does not exist yet. 30 degrees does not sound like much until you ask 30 degrees of what? This is not a thermometer sitting low. A climate model is a stack of assumptions about what carries energy into a system and what carries it back out, and the temperature it prints at the bottom is the sum of everything in the stack. When it misses by that much, one of the assumptions is not slightly wrong, it is missing. There was an entire mechanism running in that sky, the dominant one, the one setting the temperature, and it was not in our arithmetic anywhere. And the haze does not stop at the air. Pluto has been leaking for billions of years. Methane drifts up through a thin atmosphere, slips past weak gravity, and escapes. For a long time, nobody could say where it went. It goes to Charon. The moon sits about 12,000 miles away, a battered ball of water ice roughly 750 miles across, and its northern pole is stained a deep reddish-brown, darker than anything else on it. Work published in Nature in 2016 laid out how. Because of the way Charon is tilted, that pole spends decades at a stretch in unbroken darkness, which makes it a cold trap. Escaped methane drifts across, freezes onto it because there is no warmth anywhere to keep it a gas, and piles up for years. Then the sunlight comes back, and it does not melt any of it away. Ultraviolet light and cosmic rays break the frozen methane apart and weld the fragments into heavier compounds that will not evaporate. The stain is permanent. One world exhales, and the other one keeps the receipt. Then in October of 2024, Sylvia Protopapa and her team at the Southwest Research Institute published what Webb had found sitting on that surface: frozen carbon dioxide and hydrogen peroxide, which radiation appears to be manufacturing out of Charon's own water ice, slowly, over an amount of time that does not have a human word attached to it. Neither had ever been confirmed there. So the soot is not a detail of the atmosphere. The soot is the dominant process in the system. It sets the temperature of one world and it paints the other, and the team's own summary of the exchange is that it happens nowhere else in the solar system, which raises the question that should be keeping somebody up at night. How many other systems are doing it? We cannot answer that, and the reason is worse than the physics. Pluto sits in the Kuiper belt, a ring of icy debris past Neptune, holding an estimated 100,000 or more objects wider than 60 miles across. One spacecraft has ever been out there. It made 2 flybys in its entire working life, Pluto and a small body called Era Koth. Then it kept going. It is still going, it is not coming back. There is no funded mission to return, no orbiter, no lander. The trip alone would eat the better part of a decade before the first measurement, which is why the outer solar system keeps losing budget fights to targets that answer in 3 years instead of 30. Pluto is not the strangest thing in that belt. Pluto is the one bright enough to measure. Everything you believe about the outer third of your own solar system rests on a single sky that we finally got a clean measurement of last year. Stand on the surface for a moment. The sun is still up there, but it is a bright pinhead you could stare straight at without flinching, throwing no warmth at all onto anything. The sky around it is a permanent grey-blue dimness, never fully day, never fully night, just a dimness that does not resolve. The ground under you rings like rock, and Charon hangs overhead, nailed to one spot in that sky, never rising, never setting, never moving an inch. The two of them are locked face to face, around a point in empty space between them, and have been for longer than there has been anything on Earth to notice. Nothing in that view moves. Nothing in that view has moved for 4 billion years. And the sky is working the whole time. Put the two hazes side by side. Same chemistry, same reactions, sunlight breaking methane and nitrogen into heavier organic junk. On Titan, it holds the heat in. On Pluto, it throws the heat away. When Bertrand's team was asked what decides which way it goes, they did not reach for a mechanism, because there is not one to reach for. The honest answer was that it depends on the particles themselves, their size, their shape, whether they are wrapped in a skin of ice, and those properties are not well known. So the mechanism is confirmed, and the rule is missing. The difference between a world that keeps its warmth and a world that bleeds it into space is a property of a speck you could lose in the whirl of your fingerprint, and right now, nobody can tell you which specks do which puts a quiet crack under a lot of things. Bertrand has said the same haze-driven climate may be running on other worlds wrapped in the stuff, Neptune's moon Triton among them. Every hazy body we have ever modeled, every hazy exoplanet we will ever squint at through an atmosphere we cannot visit, has been sorted by a rule we have now watched break once, on the only example within reach. We did not find out that Pluto is weird. We found out we cannot tell in advance which way a sky goes, and we have been filling in that answer for decades on worlds we will never reach. And there is one more sky in that category. Before oxygen filled the air you are breathing, Earth may have worn a haze of organic particles, nitrogen and hydrocarbon chemistry. Tholins, or something similar enough to share the family name, forming high in the sky and snowing down, exactly the way they are snowing onto Pluto while you sit there. If that is right, that is the sky the first living chemistry started under, and the researchers working on Pluto's haze say studying it may tell us something about the conditions that made early Earth habitable. Now hold that against what we just learned. We cannot say which direction a haze like that pushes a world, which means the one atmosphere whose outcome matters to you personally, the one that ended in you, is built out of the exact physics we have just finished admitting we cannot call in advance. Webb goes back every few months, whenever Pluto swings into view, and adds another point to the curve. Nothing dramatic happens on those days. A grain of soot smaller than a fraction of a hair takes in a little light, lets it go as infrared, and pulls a fraction of a degree out of a world that had none to spare. And here is the thing that should sit badly with you. That grain is not signaling. It is not an anomaly announcing itself. There was no alert, no transmission, no moment when the universe raised its hand and said the box is wrong, the label is wrong, come and look. For 4 billion years the grain has been doing exactly what physics requires of it, correctly, every second, all the way through Tombor squinting at his plates, all the way through the vote, all the way through every poster we ever printed, and every classroom that ever taught the wrong thing with complete confidence. The only event in June of 2025 was on our end. We finally built a mirror big enough to be told. That is the part worth carrying out of here. Every correction we have ever received from the universe arrived on our schedule, not its. Not when the thing out there got strange. When we got an instrument. The heliocentric solar system was true for the entire run of human history, and it waited on a lens. The bacteria in your gut were there through every plague we blamed on bad air, and they waited on a lens. Pluto's sky has been refrigerating itself since the sun was young, and it waited on a mirror 21 feet across that had to be folded up to fit inside a rocket. The universe was never withholding anything. It was just not talking. There is a difference, and the difference is the whole reason 100,000 things can be true right now, 4 billion miles out, with nobody wrong on purpose, and everybody wrong anyway. Now scale that. There are 100,000 worlds out past Neptune wider than 60 miles. Every one of them has a sky, or a surface, or an interior, running whatever physics it runs, and has been running it since before there was anything on this planet capable of being wrong about it. Not one of them is transmitting. Not one of them will correct you. They do not care whether your models fit. They never have. If every model we own is wrong about all 100,000 of them, nothing out there shifts by a single degree to let you know. The universe does not file a correction. It keeps being exactly what it is, at the temperature it actually is, for as long as it takes, which is forever, and it will let a species look straight at a thing for 96 years and get it wrong the entire time without so much as a flicker. We had a rule for what a sky does. On the one world out of 100,000 that we managed to check, the rule missed by 30 degrees. The grain takes in the light. It lets the light go. It has not been wrong once.